The night swallowed the mountain road whole, a ravenous maw of impenetrable blackness that clung to the asphalt like a second skin. My headlights, usually a comforting beacon, felt impossibly feeble, barely carving a tunnel through the oppressive void. Pine trees, ancient and gnarled, stood like silent sentinels, their shadowy forms blurring into an indistinguishable wall along the winding curves of the remote pass. The only sound was the low hum of my aging SUV and the occasional whisper of wind through the skeletal branches. I was deep in the Pacific Northwest, miles from anything resembling civilization, a place where the wild still held dominion, and every shadow seemed to hold a secret. It was a familiar route, a solace in its isolation, but tonight an undeniable premonition tightened its icy grip around my chest. Then came the jolt. Not a subtle bump, but a bone-rattling thud that sent a shockwave through the chassis, violently throwing my coffee mug from the dashboard. The SUV lurched violently, tires squealing in protest as I wrestled with the steering wheel, fighting to keep it from careening off the narrow grade and into the unseen abyss below. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden terrifying silence that followed the impact. I slammed on the brakes, the vehicle skidding to a halt, nose pointed precariously towards the steep drop-off. For a moment I sat there, breath held hostage, hands still clenched to the wheel, the metallic tang of fear sharp on my tongue. What in the hell was that? A deer? It felt too solid. Too massive. A log? No, logs don't hit back with that kind of force. The air outside felt colder, charged with an unsettling stillness. Every rational fiber of my being screamed at me to simply put the car in drive, turn around, and speed back towards the faint glow of the distant town, to flee the unknown. But another, more primal instinct, a deep-seated curiosity that had guided my life for as long as I could remember, tugged at me with an irresistible force. It was a compulsion I knew well, the silent whisper that had led me down countless forgotten trails and into the heart of remote wilderness, with nothing but a camera and a sense of wonder. My name is Alex. For years, I've been a recluse by choice, finding more comfort in the silent grandeur of ancient forests than in the cacophony of human society. My cabin, nestled deep within these very mountains, serves as both sanctuary and base camp for my twin passions: wilderness photography and a lifelong, arguably obsessive, delve into cryptozoology. I've spent more nights than I can count, tracking elusive wildlife, capturing the fleeting beauty of a lynx, the majestic flight of an eagle. But beneath that, always, was the hunt for something more. The whispers of legend, the blurry photos, the tantalizing glimpses of the unconfirmed. Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Whatever you called it, the idea of a giant sentient primate roaming these very woods had captivated me since childhood. It wasn't just a myth to me. It was a profound possibility, a missing piece in the grand tapestry of life. This collision, this unexpected, violent encounter on a road I considered my own, felt different. It wasn't the scare of hitting an animal. It was the chilling, immediate realization that whatever I had struck was wrong. It wasn't the weight of a deer or the density of a bear. There was a unique, disturbing quality to the impact, a sense of hitting something utterly out of place, something that didn't belong in the natural order I understood. My car still shuddered faintly, a testament to the force. I fumbled for my high beams, blindingly illuminating the narrow stretch of asphalt in front of me. Nothing immediately visible, but the silence, that profound, unnatural silence outside the car, spoke volumes. My flashlight, a heavy-duty beam I never drove without, lay on the passenger seat. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it. The cool metal a stark contrast to the sudden heat in my face. Stepping out into that preternaturally quiet night felt like stepping into an unknown dimension. The air thick with anticipation, a primal fear prickling at my skin. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sounded magnified, menacing. The wind picked up, a low moan through the trees, a fitting soundtrack to the chilling drama unfolding. My internal debate raged. Rational fear versus an almost irrational compulsion, a deep-seated human instinct to understand, to witness, even if it meant confronting the terrifying unknown. My car, a faithful companion on countless wilderness expeditions, was clearly damaged. The left headlight was shattered, and the fender was bent at an unnatural angle. This wasn't a minor fender bender. This was serious. But the broken headlight was suddenly secondary. My gaze was drawn forward, past the splintered glass and crumpled metal, into the inky blackness just beyond my reach. The thud, the sheer force. It resonated in my bones, a tangible echo of something immense. I had to know, I had to see. It was a compulsion far stronger than any fear. A lifetime of searching culminating in this single terrifying moment. The wilderness, usually a comforting embrace, now felt like a predator, watching, waiting. The cold seeped into my bones, but it wasn't just the mountain air. It was the cold dread of what I might find. What kind of creature could absorb that kind of impact and not be immediately visible? Not make a sound. The thought, half-formed and utterly unbelievable, clawed its way into my mind, bringing with it a torrent of adrenaline. Could it be? After all these years, all the countless hours spent chasing shadows and half-truths, had I finally stumbled upon it? The very idea was both exhilarating and utterly terrifying. My hand instinctively went to the small, worn camera bag on the passenger seat, even as my legs felt like lead. I had to investigate. I had to know. For all of you, watching, who share this fascination with the unexplained, with the mysteries that still linger in the hidden corners of our world, remember to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next, because out there, in the impenetrable darkness of that silent mountain road, something was waiting, and I was about to walk right into it. The chilling metallic groan of the damaged truck door echoed through the otherwise silent forest as Alex pushed it open, a sound that seemed to amplify the profound isolation of his predicament. His heart hammered an erratic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of primal fear battling with a strange, almost academic curiosity. He gripped the heavy-duty flashlight, its beam a solitary spear of light, cutting through the oppressive darkness, illuminating the immediate aftermath of the collision. The air, already thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, now carried a faint, coppery tang, the unmistakable smell of blood. Every crunch of his boots on the gravel felt like an announcement, a trespass into a realm where he was profoundly out of place, profoundly vulnerable. He moved cautiously, his gaze sweeping the shadowy edges of the road, half expecting to see eyes glinting back from the impenetrable thicket. The impact had been forceful, undeniably against something large, and the truck's crumpled fender was a testament to that. But what was it? The question pulsed in his mind, a relentless drumbeat. Not a deer, that much he was certain. Deer were common, but this had felt different, far too dense, far too solid. The strange, almost guttural thud still reverberated in his bones. As he rounded the front of his vehicle, the beam of his flashlight finally settled on a sight that stole the air from his lungs. There, partially obscured by a fallen log at the edge of the embankment, was a massive, shaggy form. It was slumped awkwardly, one limb twisted beneath it at an unnatural angle. A low, mournful sound, like a deep, suffering sigh, escaped the creature. A sound that was both animalistic and disturbingly resonant with human anguish. My God, he thought, frozen to the spot. It was real. His cryptozoology studies, his lifelong fascination, had always been intellectual pursuits, a search for truth in the blurry photographs and anecdotal tales. But now, it was no longer a theory, no longer a legend, but a living, breathing, injured being right before him. The creature was enormous, easily over 7 feet tall, even in its slumped position, covered from head to toe in thick, dark brown fur that seemed to absorb the flashlight's beam. Its sheer mass was intimidating, a silent testament to its raw power, even in its current state of distress. A fresh wave of fear, cold and sharp, washed over him. This was a wild creature, a mythical beast. What if it was dangerous? What if, in its pain, it saw him as a threat? His instincts screamed at him to retreat, to get back in the truck, drive away, and pretend this never happened. But the whimpering sound, growing slightly more distinct now, rooted him to the spot. It wasn't a growl, not a snarl, but a sound of undeniable suffering, a plea. He forced himself to take another step, then another, his hand instinctively reaching for the hunting knife holstered at his hip, a meager comfort against such an imposing presence. As he drew closer, the details became clearer, more horrifying. A dark, viscous pool was spreading beneath its flank, reflecting dimly in the flashlight's glow. The smell of blood intensified, rich and heavy. The creature's head was turned away, its face buried against the earth, but its broad, powerful shoulders heaved with ragged breaths. "Hey," Alex whispered, his voice cracking, barely audible above his own pounding heart. He didn't know what else to say. "Hey there. Are you okay?" The absurdity of the question hung in the cold night air. Of course it wasn't okay. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the massive head lifted. 2 large, dark eyes, surprisingly intelligent and imbued with a profound, almost human-like sorrow, met his gaze. There was no aggression, no fury, only pain, and a deep, unsettling confusion. In that moment, Alex's scientific curiosity, his lifelong quest, evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming, undeniable wave of empathy. This wasn't some monster. This was a living, sentient being, gravely injured and alone. He holstered his knife, the unconscious gesture, a silent surrender of self-preservation to a deeper imperative. He had to help. The environment itself seemed to conspire against him. The biting chill of the mountain air was already setting in, promising hypothermia if the creature remained exposed. The isolation was profound. He was hours from the nearest town, and even if he could get a signal, what would he tell emergency services? "I hit Bigfoot, and it's bleeding out on the road." Laughter or a mental health assessment would be his only response. Reaching into his truck, he pulled out his well-stocked first aid kit, usually reserved for minor scrapes and sprains during his photography expeditions. It felt ludicrously inadequate now. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his trembling hands. "Okay, big fella," he muttered, more to himself than to the creature. "Let's see what we're dealing with." He approached it slowly, deliberately, his movements unthreatening. The Sasquatch watched him, its intelligent eyes tracking his every move, a soft, pathetic whimper escaping its throat again. Alex knelt down a few feet away, shining the light on the wound. It was a gaping laceration on its thigh, deep and ragged, consistent with being struck by a vehicle. The blood was flowing steadily, not gushing, but consistently enough to be alarming. The limb beneath it looked badly mangled. "All right," he said, his voice softer now, more reassuring. "I'm going to try and help you." He fumbled with the sterile gauze pads, his hands slick with a nervous sweat that had nothing to do with exertion. He knew he couldn't stop the bleeding entirely with what he had, but he could at least try to staunch it, to buy them some time. This enormous creature, a being of legend, was vulnerable, dependent on him, a mere human. It was a surreal, terrifying, and utterly compelling moment. He had to make a move, quickly. The night was growing, colder, and the lifeblood of this incredible, mysterious being was steadily seeping into the cold, unforgiving earth. The guttural sound that erupted from the massive form was unlike anything Alex had ever heard. It wasn't the roar of an enraged animal, nor the whimper of a dog. It was a deep, resonant moan, heavy with a sorrow that vibrated through the cold night air and settled deep within his bones. A shiver, not entirely of fear, ran down his spine. This wasn't just some beast he had struck. This was a being in profound distress, its pain echoing a depth of sentience Alex had previously only theorized about. The creature's head, larger than any human's, slowly lifted, and its eyes, dark and intelligent, met his. In that gaze, he saw not aggression, but an almost heartbreaking plea, a raw vulnerability that shattered every preconceived notion he held about the fierce, elusive Sasquatch of legend. His scientific curiosity, usually a cold, objective lens, was suddenly overwhelmed by a powerful surge of empathy. He felt an undeniable pull, a primal urge to alleviate the suffering before him. The fear that had held him, rooted just moments ago, began to recede, replaced by an unfamiliar, compelling sense of duty. He took another hesitant step closer, then another, his boots crunching softly on the fallen leaves. The air was thick with the scent of pine, damp earth, and something else, a musky, animalistic odor, but also a faint, almost human-like aroma of blood and sweat. He could hear its ragged breathing now, deep and labored, and the soft, almost rhythmic drip of blood onto the leaf litter. He knelt, slowly, carefully, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Hey there," he murmured, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his hands. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's eyes, intelligent and filled with an ancient weariness, never left his. As Alex spoke, a massive hand, covered in thick, dark fur, slowly, tentatively, extended towards him. It was an enormous hand, easily twice the size of his own, with powerful, blunt fingers and long, dark nails. Yet the gesture was not one of menace or aggression. There was a surprising delicacy in its movement, a trembling vulnerability that spoke volumes. It was not reaching out to swat him away or to retaliate. It was reaching out in a silent, desperate plea, an outstretched hand in dire need of assistance. Alex hesitated for only a fraction of a second, his human instincts screaming caution, but his heart urging him forward. He gently placed his own hand, palm up, just beneath the creature's massive fingers. He expected to feel a rough, calloused hide, but what he felt was a surprising warmth, and a texture not entirely unlike coarse human skin, though much thicker. The creature's fingers twitched, then gently closed around his, a soft pressure, not a crushing grip. It was a moment of profound, unspoken connection, a bridge built between two vastly different species, on the desolate mountain road. In that touch, Alex felt an echo of its immense pain, both physical and, he suspected, emotional. He pulled back slightly, careful not to alarm it, and began to assess the full extent of the injury. The moonlight, now intermittently peeking through the clouds, cast enough light to reveal the grim reality. The creature's left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, a deep, jagged gash visible through the matted fur, oozing dark blood. It was clearly a break, a severe one, and likely more than just bone. There were also deep lacerations along its flank, probably from the impact with his vehicle. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He couldn't leave it there. Not only was it severely injured, but the sheer size of it meant it would be an easy target for scavengers, or worse, discovered by someone with less benevolent intentions. The wilderness, usually his sanctuary, now felt like a death trap for this magnificent, suffering being. A monumental decision formed in his mind, one that defied all logic and self-preservation. He had to move it. He had to get it to his cabin, where he could properly tend to its wounds, where it would be safe, at least for a while. The thought was audacious, bordering on insane. How could one man move a creature of this size? Its sheer bulk was intimidating, yet the image of its pleading eyes, the gentle touch of its hand, spurred him on. He rummaged through his emergency kit, his mind racing, improvising a plan. He pulled out his comprehensive first aid kit, rolls of thick gauze, and his trusty utility knife. Looking around, his eyes landed on a fallen sturdy branch, thick enough to provide some support. With his knife, he quickly stripped away smaller twigs and bark, fashioning a rudimentary splint. He worked with a strange mix of urgency and meticulous care, aware that one wrong move could either cause more pain or provoke a reaction he couldn't handle. He spoke softly, continuously, explaining his actions, trying to soothe the injured creature. "This is going to hurt a bit," he murmured, "but it'll help." The creature watched him with unblinking intensity, its breath still ragged, but its eyes still carrying that silent, trusting plea. He gently, but firmly, positioned the branch along the broken limb, securing it with strips of gauze and medical tape from his kit. The Sasquatch let out another mournful groan, a sound of deep pain, but it didn't thrash or resist. It simply endured, its powerful body trembling, its gaze fixed on Alex's determined face. The rudimentary splint was far from perfect, but it was a desperate measure, a necessary first step in a journey that had just become infinitely more complex and dangerous. The night was young, and their ordeal had only just begun. The daunting task of moving the injured Sasquatch loomed before Alex, a physical and logistical Everest he had to conquer. The makeshift splint was a temporary fix, but the creature, despite its immense size, was still vulnerable, a giant in distress. He knew he couldn't simply drag it. That would inflict further, potentially fatal injury. His heavily modified overland truck, equipped for wilderness recovery, became his only hope. He moved with a focused intensity, his mind racing through possibilities, rejecting most as too dangerous. The first step was to carefully position the truck, backing it slowly, lights illuminating the massive form sprawled on the cold asphalt. He retrieved his heavy-duty recovery straps and the powerful winch from the truck bed. "Okay, big guy," Alex murmured, his voice a low, steady rumble, designed to soothe more than to instruct. "This is going to be tricky. I need you to stay as still as you can." He began by carefully threading one of the wide, durable straps beneath the creature's upper torso, just behind its shoulders. Slowly, gently, avoiding the lacerations on its flank. The Sasquatch watched his every move, its intelligent eyes tracking his hands, a low growl rumbling in its chest, not of aggression, but of deep discomfort. Alex paused, meeting its gaze, communicating reassurance. "I'm not hurting you on purpose," he whispered, his own heart pounding against his ribs. "Just trying to get you safe." He then attached the strap to the winch cable, ensuring a snug, secure connection. The powerful winch hummed to life, a mechanical groan echoing in the silent night. He winched slowly, agonizingly, inch by excruciating inch. The creature's immense weight tested the limits of his equipment and his nerve. He constantly monitored its reactions, ready to stop at any sign of increased pain or resistance. Each subtle shift of its body, each strained whimper, sent a jolt of anxiety through him. He spoke continuously, a stream of nonsensical comfort, a human sound in the vast wilderness. "Almost there. Just a little more. You're doing great." He worked methodically, the forest sounds amplifying the strain of the winch, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a nocturnal bird, all serving to heighten the surreal nature of his predicament. The first major challenge was getting the Sasquatch off the road and onto the comparatively softer, but still uneven ground alongside. This required careful maneuvering of the truck, using his steering and the winch simultaneously to guide the creature's body. He laid down tarps and blankets he kept in his truck for camping, hoping to provide a slightly smoother surface for the next phase of the move. The massive bulk shifted with a heavy sigh, its enormous hand instinctively reaching out, briefly gripping the ground as if to steady itself. Alex was acutely aware of the creature's immense power, even in its injured state, and the fragile trust that held them together. Hours bled into the pre-dawn gloom. The air grew colder, and a thin mist began to shroud the pines. Alex's muscles screamed in protest, his hands raw from handling the heavy straps. He had managed to load the upper half of the Sasquatch onto a heavy-duty cargo sled he usually used for hauling firewood, painstakingly sliding it beneath the creature's immense frame. The broken leg, however, remained a critical concern. He had to lift and support it manually while using the winch to pull the sled, a delicate dance of brute force and careful precision. There were moments of shared vulnerability, flashes of profound connection that transcended species. When the creature winced, a deep, sorrowful sound escaping its throat, Alex instinctively paused, stroking its massive fur-covered arm, offering a silent apology for the pain he was forced to inflict. It would look at him with eyes that held an ancient sadness, a clear understanding of its predicament and his efforts. Occasionally, it would emit soft, guttural rumbles, almost like words, and Alex felt a profound certainty that it was attempting to communicate, to express its gratitude, or perhaps just its suffering. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Sasquatch was secured in the bed of his truck, its body carefully padded with blankets and sleeping bags to minimize movement and absorb shock during the drive. The sheer size of it meant it barely fit, its head resting near the cab, its feet extending precariously close to the tailgate. Alex breathed a sigh of relief that was part exhaustion, part sheer disbelief. He had done it. Against all odds, he had managed to move the legendary creature. The drive to his secluded cabin was slow and deliberate. He navigated the rough, unpaved logging roads with extreme caution, every bump sending a fresh wave of adrenaline through him. He constantly checked on his unusual passenger through the rearview mirror, ensuring it remained as stable as possible. The first light of dawn began to paint the sky in hues of purple and orange as he finally pulled up to his cabin, nestled deep within the towering trees, far from any prying eyes. The cabin, usually a sanctuary of peaceful solitude, now presented a new, immediate logistical nightmare. How was he going to get this giant, injured being inside? The doorway was too narrow, the steps too numerous. His mind, already strained, whirred with renewed problem-solving. He settled on a temporary solution: the large, open-sided woodshed attached to the cabin. It was spacious, covered, and could be quickly secured. With a fresh surge of determination, and using a similar, excruciatingly slow process of winch and careful guidance, he began the final, arduous task of maneuvering the creature into its temporary sanctuary. The Sasquatch lay there, a monument to the wild, its breath still shallow, its eyes fixed on Alex's weary but resolute face. The silent plea now tinged with a profound, almost desperate hope. The first phase of their impossible journey was over, but the challenge had only just begun. The harrowing journey to the cabin had stretched into the pre-dawn hours, a brutal test of Alex's ingenuity and endurance. He had used every trick he knew, every piece of equipment in his truck, to carefully, painstakingly maneuver the massive creature. Winch cables groaned, tow straps stretched taut, and Alex's muscles screamed in protest. But he had persevered. Now, inside the relative warmth and seclusion of his cabin, the full, undeniable reality of his situation pressed down on him with suffocating weight. The Sasquatch, still groaning softly, lay prone on a makeshift bed of tarps and blankets he'd hastily arranged on his living room floor, filling the space with its immense presence. Its scent, a primal mix of damp earth, forest pine, and something musky and uniquely wild, permeated the air. Alex, a wilderness photographer, an amateur cryptozoologist, but certainly not a veterinarian or a doctor, was now solely responsible for the life of a legendary creature. The irony was almost laughable, if not for the gravity of the moment. He moved with a grim determination, gathering every medical supply he owned. His wilderness first aid kit was robust, designed for human injuries in remote locations, and he had a well-stocked vet kit for his own dog, though that was geared more towards minor cuts and scrapes, not a creature of this magnitude. He laid out bandages, antiseptic solutions, pain relievers, and antibiotics, a strange arsenal for the most unconventional patient he would ever encounter. He began by gently cleaning the deep lacerations, his touch as light as he could manage. The Sasquatch flinched occasionally, a deep rumble vibrating through its chest, but it remained remarkably still, its large, intelligent eyes fixed on Alex. He spoke to it in low, soothing tones, explaining each step as if it could understand every word. "This might sting a bit, big guy, but it'll help prevent infection," he murmured, dabbing an antiseptic wipe onto a particularly nasty gash on its flank. The creature let out a low whimper, but didn't attempt to pull away. This silent cooperation, this implicit trust, was both astonishing and profoundly humbling. The next few days blurred into an exhausting cycle of pain management, wound care, and an almost constant fear of discovery. Alex barely slept, snatching an hour or two here and there, always with one ear open for any sound from his massive patient. He cooked simple, nutritious meals for himself, but then faced the challenge of providing for the Sasquatch. He offered it everything he had: dried fruits, nuts, berries, even some deer jerky. To his surprise, it accepted most of it, not with ravenous hunger, but with a surprising delicacy, carefully picking through the offerings. He observed its behaviors closely, learning its subtle cues. A soft huff meant contentment, a low growl indicated discomfort, and a slow blink seemed to convey a deep contemplation. He found himself talking to it constantly, not just about its treatment, but about his own life, about the mountains, the solitude, his dreams of capturing the unseen beauty of the wild. He knew it couldn't possibly understand his words, not literally, yet there was an undeniable sense of connection, a shared presence in the quiet cabin that transcended language. The profound loneliness that often accompanied his reclusive life began to dissipate, replaced by a unique sense of purpose and, unexpectedly, a profound companionship. He would watch it as it rested, its chest rising and falling rhythmically, its massive hands surprisingly capable of delicate movements, sometimes twitching in what he imagined were dreams of the forest. He noticed the surprising softness of its fur, the intricate patterns of its skin beneath the matted hair, the powerful musculature that spoke of immense strength, now temporarily subdued by injury. Small victories punctuated the long, arduous days. The Sasquatch slowly began to accept water directly from a bowl Alex held, rather than waiting for him to leave it. It ate a little more each day, regaining some of its lost strength. One evening, after Alex had carefully changed its dressings and administered another dose of antibiotics, it reached out a hand, not for food or for help, but simply to rest it gently on Alex's arm for a long moment, its gaze meeting his. In that silent exchange, Alex felt a wave of profound emotion, gratitude, trust, and a deep, shared understanding that went beyond words. It was a testament to the creature's quiet intelligence, its profound consciousness, and its growing trust in him. Yet setbacks were also a constant threat. A spiking fever one night sent Alex into a panic, forcing him to administer stronger medication, fearing internal complications. The leg, despite his best efforts, was healing slowly, a constant source of pain, and he worried about long-term mobility. The possibility of internal bleeding, a silent killer, loomed in the back of his mind. Each small groan, each labored breath from his patient, sent a jolt of anxiety through him. He was out of his depth, yet he pushed on, driven by an almost fierce protective instinct. He was no longer just helping an injured creature. He was protecting a secret, nurturing a life that the world believed was merely a myth. This responsibility weighed heavily on him, but it also filled him with a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. The silent, powerful presence of the Sasquatch in his cabin transformed his solitary existence, weaving a complex tapestry of fear, wonder, and an improbable, growing bond. As days bled into weeks within the secluded confines of Alex's cabin, a silent, profound bond began to solidify between him and the injured Sasquatch. It wasn't a relationship forged in words, for their languages were vastly different, but in shared moments of vulnerability, trust, and an evolving understanding that transcended verbal communication. Alex spent countless hours tending to its wounds, changing bandages, and carefully applying salves he'd concocted from his extensive knowledge of wild herbs. He observed its every subtle movement, its reactions to pain, its expressions of quiet contentment when the fever finally broke, and its appetite slowly returned. He learned to interpret the slight shifts in its massive eyebrows, the almost imperceptible twitch of its powerful lips, and the depth of emotion conveyed through its intelligent, dark eyes. The creature, whom Alex had silently started calling Goliath in his mind, responded in kind. It learned the rhythm of Alex's movements, the gentle cadence of his voice, the cautious yet firm touch of his hands. Goliath would often watch Alex as he went about his daily routines, preparing food, reading from his worn cryptozoology texts, or sketching in his notebook. There were moments of startling intimacy, like when Goliath would offer a large, berry-stained hand to Alex after he'd been foraging, or when it would lean its massive head against the doorframe, softly rumbling a low, comforting hum as Alex struggled with a particularly stubborn bandage. He saw none of the aggressive, territorial beast of legend. Instead, he saw a gentle giant, capable of immense compassion, deep sorrow, and an almost childlike curiosity about the small world of the cabin. Its profound connection to the wild was evident even indoors. Goliath would often sit by the large window, gazing out at the dense forest, its eyes reflecting a deep, almost mournful longing. Alex found himself adapting, creating a larger, softer bed from spare, blankets and furs, adjusting the cabin's temperature, and even altering his diet to include more of the fruits, nuts, and specific plant matter that Goliath seemed to prefer. He saw a being of immense wisdom in those quiet moments, a creature whose understanding of the natural world far surpassed his own, merely glimpsed through its patient observations of the trees, the changing light, the sounds of the distant stream. He witnessed its emotional depth firsthand. One evening, a particularly harsh storm raged outside, and Goliath pressed itself against the strongest wall of the cabin, emitting soft, anxious whines. Alex, understanding its distress, sat beside it, talking softly, offering comfort until the storm passed. He realized this wasn't just an animal. It was a sentient being, an ancient soul inhabiting a form that science refused to acknowledge. As weeks turned into months, Goliath's broken leg healed. The makeshift splint had been replaced by a more robust, carefully fashioned brace, and now, with remarkable speed, the creature was beginning to bear weight on it again. It moved gingerly at first, then with increasing confidence, testing its limits, flexing its powerful muscles. With newfound strength, however, came a palpable restlessness. The longing in Goliath's eyes as it stared out the window intensified. Its low, rumbling sounds became more frequent, not of pain, but of a deep, resonant yearning. It would pace the small cabin, its immense form dwarfing the space, its gaze constantly drawn to the wild expanse beyond the glass. Alex understood implicitly that his cabin, for all its newfound safety and comfort, was a temporary refuge, not its true home. The wild was calling, and Goliath was listening. This growing strength in Goliath, and its undeniable desire to return to its element, plunged Alex into a profound moral dilemma. He possessed irrefutable proof of Bigfoot's existence, not just the creature itself, resting feet away from him, but also the countless photographs and videos he had meticulously captured during its recovery. Images of its expressive face, the unique patterns of its fur, the intricate details of its powerful hands, the very act of it accepting food from his hand. This evidence, if released, would undoubtedly shock the world, redefine biology, and cement his name in history. His lifelong dream of revealing the truth about cryptids would finally be realized. He imagined the headlines, the scientific papers, the endless debates, the fame, the vindication. His life, as he knew it, would be irrevocably altered, transformed from a secluded wilderness photographer into a global sensation. Yet, a deeper, more primal obligation tugged at his conscience. His interactions with Goliath had stripped away all preconceived notions of a monstrous beast, replacing them with the raw, undeniable truth of a gentle, intelligent, and deeply sensitive being. To expose Goliath to the relentless scrutiny of human civilization felt like an act of betrayal. He pictured the inevitable spectacle: cages, laboratories, hunting parties, the dissection of a living legend. The very thought sickened him. He had protected it, healed it, and in doing so, had formed an unbreakable bond. How could he then condemn it to a future that would surely be filled with terror and exploitation? The weight of this secret, the monumental choice before him, pressed down with an almost unbearable intensity. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones, that keeping Goliath's existence a secret was paramount. But the call of scientific discovery, of personal triumph, whispered like a siren song. He wrestled with these conflicting forces, knowing that an answer, a decision, was rapidly approaching. The time for Goliath to return to its true domain was nearing, and with it, the moment of Alex's most profound ethical test. The air grew heavy, thick with an oppressive stillness that often preceded a major weather event in these mountains. Alex felt it in his bones, a low, thrumming anxiety that mirrored the churning in his gut. Goliath, too, sensed the shift. Its pacing increased, its low vocalizations becoming more urgent, a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the cabin floor. The creature's eyes, usually reflecting a quiet dignity, now held a darting, apprehensive quality, scanning the window as if searching for something unseen yet deeply felt. Then, the first crack of thunder split the sky, a violent, guttural roar that made the small cabin tremble. A fierce wind lashed at the pines outside, their ancient limbs groaning in protest. Rain began to fall, not in gentle drops, but in sheets, driven sideways by the gale, drumming a furious rhythm against the window panes. This sudden violence outside, this raging tempest, mirrored the storm brewing within Alex. The past weeks had been a fragile truce between his scientific ambition and his burgeoning compassion. But now, as the wind howled and the rain hammered down, the truce shattered. Goliath's agitation was undeniable, a raw, primal response to the elemental forces unleashed. This creature, a being of the wild, was trapped, confined by four walls that now felt like a prison. Its instinctual need to be out there, to face the storm on its own terms, was palpable. Alex looked at the magnificent, powerful form of his unexpected patient, watched its restless energy, its almost desperate desire for freedom, and a clarity unlike anything he'd known before washed over him. It was time. The creature needed to go, not just for its own well-being, its intrinsic connection to the untamed wilderness, but also to protect the fragile secret of its very existence. The storm was a catalyst, forcing his hand, making the inevitable decision undeniable. He moved with a new sense of purpose, his earlier indecision replaced by a grim resolve. Gathering essentials, he packed a canvas bag with dried fruit, jerky, and a thermos of warm sweet tea. Provisions for Goliath's return journey, as much as for himself. He fetched a thick, oilskin poncho, large enough to offer some protection from the elements to the creature, though he knew it would offer little solace against the true fury of the storm. As he worked, he spoke to Goliath, his voice low and steady, imbuing each word with reassurance, even though he knew the creature likely understood only the tone, the intention. "It's time, old friend," he murmured, stroking the coarse fur on its shoulder. "You're strong now. The forest calls you home." Goliath watched him, its intelligent eyes tracking his every move. When Alex offered the poncho, the creature responded with a deep rumble, leaning into the offered garment, allowing Alex to drape it over its massive shoulders. There was a sense of shared understanding in that moment, a melancholic acceptance of what had to be. Alex felt a profound ache in his chest, a hollow space opening where Goliath's quiet presence had resided for weeks. This creature, once an enigma, then a patient, had become a companion, a silent confidant in the heart of the wild. The cabin, which had felt like his sanctuary, now seemed too small, too empty, even with Goliath still standing there. As the storm raged outside, illuminating the cabin intermittently with flashes of lightning, Alex opened the heavy wooden door. The wind immediately tore inside, whipping through the small space, bringing with it the scent of wet earth and pine needles. Goliath paused at the threshold, its immense form silhouetted against the tumultuous night sky. It turned then, slowly, deliberately, fixing Alex with a long, unblinking gaze. There was no fear in those eyes, no anger, only a deep, knowing understanding. It was a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey, of the brief, improbable interlude they had carved out from the fabric of reality. Alex felt a lump in his throat, a tear tracing a path down his cheek, unseen in the dim, flickering light. This gaze was Goliath's farewell, a silent promise of remembrance, an echo of gratitude that resonated deep within his soul. It was enough. He took a deep, steadying breath, then stepped out into the onslaught of the storm, leading the way. The ground was slick with mud, the forest a chaotic symphony of cracking branches and roaring wind. Alex moved carefully, his headlamp cutting a narrow beam through the dark, swirling rain. Goliath followed, its massive frame moving with a newfound grace, its powerful legs carrying it effortlessly over fallen debris. The splint on its leg seemed almost forgotten, the injury a fading memory. They walked for what felt like an eternity, deeper and deeper into the dense, ancient woods. Alex chose a path that would lead Goliath to the wildest, most inaccessible parts of the preserve, a place where humans seldom ventured, a true sanctuary. He knew the terrain intimately, every hidden trail, every shadowed ravine. Finally, at the edge of a deep, moss-laden glade, surrounded by towering redwoods that had stood for centuries, Alex stopped. He turned to Goliath. The creature stood stoic, rain plastering its fur to its powerful body, its eyes still holding that profound, inexplicable wisdom. Alex reached out, his hand instinctively resting on Goliath's forearm, feeling the immense strength beneath the wet fur. "Go," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Be free." With a final, lingering look, a moment stretched thin with unspoken goodbyes, Goliath melted into the shadows. One moment, its imposing form was there, a sentinel against the storm. The next, it was gone, absorbed by the forest, disappearing into the rustling leaves and the driving rain, leaving behind only the rhythmic drumming of the storm and an indelible mark on Alex's soul. The silence, after Goliath's departure, was deafening, even amidst the roaring tempest. He was alone again, profoundly changed, carrying a secret that would shape the rest of his life. The cabin, once a sanctuary filled with the soft rustle of the Sasquatch's movements and the low thrum of its breathing, now echoed with an unsettling silence. Alex stood at the window, staring into the tree line where Goliath had vanished, a ghost of its immense form lingering in his peripheral vision. The forest, usually a source of comfort and inspiration, felt suddenly vast and empty, its secrets now heavier, more profound. He returned to the worn armchair, the indent where Goliath had often rested its head still visible on the cushions, a silent testament to their shared time. The sense of an ending, stark and undeniable, washed over him. Processing the incredible experience began with an instinctual, almost primal act of preservation. He retrieved his camera from its waterproof case, its memory card humming with a treasure trove of images. Each click through the stored files was a pang, a reminder of the extraordinary creature he had come to know. There were close-ups of its intelligent eyes, its powerful, yet surprisingly delicate hands, cradling a berry, the subtle shift of its fur as it breathed in sleep. Images that could rewrite history, redefine human understanding of life on Earth. But as he viewed them, a deeper truth settled within him. The promise he had made, not with words, but with shared moments of vulnerability and trust, resonated more powerfully than any scientific accolades could. With a deep, resolute breath, he navigated the camera's menu, selected all the images and videos pertaining to Goliath, and with a final, decisive press of a button, obliterated them. The digital ghosts vanished, leaving behind only the landscapes, the flora, the mundane forest scenes that formed the backdrop of his old life. He then took the memory card from the camera, walked to the fireplace, and watched as the plastic melted, then warped, and finally succumbed to the flames, turning into a brittle, black husk. The physical manifestation of his secret was gone, leaving only the indelible imprint on his soul. The silence that followed was not an absence, but a presence, a profound hum of understanding. Alex felt a shift within him, a reshaping of his very perception of reality. The world he inhabited before Goliath now seemed smaller, less defined by concrete facts and more by the unseen, the unheard, the subtly interwoven tapestry of life. His understanding of humanity itself had deepened. If such a magnificent, sentient being could exist in hidden serenity, what else lay beyond the narrow confines of human knowledge? He felt a heightened sense of empathy, a profound connection to all living things, a respect for the intricate balance of the wilderness he called home. He recognized that some mysteries were not meant to be unraveled and dissected, but to be revered, protected, and allowed to simply exist. His photography, once driven by a quest for visual spectacle and the thrill of discovery, now took on a new dimension. He still ventured into the sprawling forests, his camera still his constant companion, but his lens now sought not just beauty, but the echoes of hidden life, the subtle movements in the shadows, the whisper of ancient lore. He would find himself pausing, his gaze lingering on a newly disturbed patch of moss, an unusually large footprint, or the lingering scent of damp earth and pine, his heart stirring with a quiet knowing. He understood that the forest held secrets far grander than any he could capture on film, and he became their silent, vigilant guardian. This enhanced sense of purpose, this spiritual awakening, was Goliath's lasting gift. He was no longer just Alex, the reclusive photographer. He was a keeper of the wild's deepest, most wondrous confidences. He often wondered about Goliath, picturing it moving freely through the ancient trees, its wound fully healed, its spirit restored. He knew, with a certainty, that transcended logic, that it was out there, a living testament to the enduring mystery of the natural world. The experience had taught him that the veil between myth and reality was far thinner than most believed. A delicate membrane that, once pierced, revealed wonders beyond imagination. He questioned whether the world, in its clamor for absolute certainty and verifiable facts, was truly ready for such a revelation. Would such a magnificent creature be celebrated or hunted, respected or exploited? His decision, agonizing as it had been, felt increasingly like the only righteous path. Some secrets, he concluded, were not meant for public consumption. They were meant to endure in the quiet places, protected by those few who had been privileged to glimpse their truth, allowing humanity to retain its sense of wonder, its capacity for belief in something greater than itself. And in that quiet protection, a profound peace resided. Thank you for watching this extraordinary journey into the heart of the unknown. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of wonder in your own soul, please give this video a like. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever encountered something unexplainable? A glimpse beyond the ordinary? We love hearing your personal stories of the mysterious. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling real-life encounters and explorations of the unexplained. Your support helps us continue to bring these incredible narratives to life. Now, for another adventure, be sure to check out our next suggested video. Until then, keep an open mind, and remember, the world is full of wonders waiting to be discovered.